Good afternoon. I hope that, like me, you spent at least a little bit of time watching the Democratic National Convention last night. I think it's always useful to see both political parties, and I encourage Democrats to watch the Republicans and Republicans to watch the Democrats. But I thought the most interesting thing was that in 61 speeches, literally 61 speeches, not a single person at the Democratic National Convention on the opening night mentioned ISIS. Now think about that. With 61 different possible speakers, including, by the way, some very competent, very interesting people like Senator Cory Booker, who's a very smart guy. None of them, not a one of them, thought it was necessary to mention the terrorist threat to the entire Western world. What makes it particularly sad when I was thinking about it this morning was, of course, the news this morning from Normandy, France, where two Islamic supremacists broke into a church during Mass and beheaded an 84-year-old priest while holding others captive and hurting one of them severely. Now ask yourself, what kind of evil person breaks into a church and cuts off the head of an 84-year-old priest? This is a pretty good reminder that we're up against enemies who are genuinely evil. But I ask to go back over the last week. Let me share this with you. I don't usually do this, but I wanted to be accurate. So I had pulled together exactly what, just the week, mostly in Germany. Matt Cullen, who is one of our interns, pulled this together. Last Monday, there was an axe attack on a train in Germany. This was by an Afghan refugee. 4 people were injured, and the attacker was reported to have said Allahu Akbar before attacking. Friday, there was a shooting in a Munich shopping district. 9 were killed, 16 were injured, carried out by a German of Iranian background. And by the way, Clist and I, as you may know from Facebook Live, were just in Munich on June 15th and actually did a Facebook Live from the Glockenspiel right there in the center of Munich. Sunday, there was also a machete attack in Stuttgart that killed a pregnant woman. 2 others were injured. This was, I believe, by a Syrian refugee. And the fact is, I went to high school at Stuttgart American High School, so again, I have some sense of ties. Sunday in Ansbach, Germany, a Syrian asylum seeker who pledged allegiance to ISIS exploded a suicide bomb and injured 15 in revenge against the Germans for, quote, obstructing Islam. And by the way, in this particular case, we know that this particular person put nails and other construction material in his backpack so that the bomb would send out shrapnel to maximize the number of people it hurt. Now, you have to ask yourself about a great political party with a history of commitment to defending America, whether it was Andrew Jackson or Woodrow Wilson or Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Harry Truman. All of these were people who, at key moments in American history, were willing to do some pretty tough things, including World War I, World War II, the Korean War. Now, in that setting, what has happened to the Democrats? Why are they running away and hiding from the real world? And what does it say to us that in 61 speakers, not a single person mentioned ISIS? As many of you know, and you can see it on Facebook, I gave a speech last Wednesday night at the Republican National Convention, which outlined in some detail the threat to us, including a potential nuclear threat. And I tried to really focus, for what was a fairly long speech by convention standards, on where we are, the dangers we face. And we went through 37 days of terrorist attacks, and I had a number of friends email me and say they had no idea that many bad things had happened around the world in 37 days. Of course, I just gave you 8 days in France and Germany alone, not counting Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan, just focused on Germany and France for the last 8 days. So, Kelly McDonald says, does the Democratic National Convention jeopardize the safety of the American people by not mentioning ISIS? Well, I think it does, because if we can't have an honest national dialogue, if we can't have a bipartisan conversation about reality, and let me suggest to you, and we'll see what happens tonight and whether or not it changes tonight, and particularly what Bill Clinton's speech is like. Again, the morning after, nobody had mentioned ISIS, and 2 ISIS terrorists behead an 84-year-old priest in Normandy. I think that's worth paying attention to. It's worth reminding people that the world is dangerous. The news media made a great fuss about Donald Trump being too negative. They said his speech was dark. Well, as I just pointed out in reading to you the events of the last week in Germany and France, there's a lot of bad stuff out there. There are a lot of evil people out there. And I use the word evil deliberately. I think somebody who deliberately puts nails in their backpack so that the bomb will kill the maximum number of people is engaged in an evil act. I think somebody who uses a machete to kill a pregnant woman is engaged in an evil act. I think somebody who beheads an 84-year-old priest is engaged in an evil act. And I think both political parties ought to have a dialogue about this. I think it's very dangerous for America that the Democratic Party is now so unwilling to talk about the truth, so unwilling to deal with the real challenges of ISIS, that I think it does become a danger, not just a political danger, but a genuine danger to our country, weakening our ability to deal with these kind of problems. Samantha Beck says, how can we raise the minimum wage or make college totally free when we are trillions of dollars in debt? Well, because if you're a left-wing Democrat, you live in a fantasy world. You figure it's like having a gigantic credit card. You just keep running up more and more debt, and don't tell anybody they're going to pay for it. Because, of course, the truth is, everybody who gets something for free when the government doesn't have enough money is going to eventually pay the interest on the debt, maybe for the rest of their life. It'd be like having a giant personal credit card that you keep running up, and then one morning you get the monthly bill and realize, wow, how did that happen? So I do think that's a very good question. I think there's an economic reality that we have to look at. I think we can, frankly, find ways to make college dramatically less expensive. I think a lot of the tuition increases have been a response to federal funding and the fact that the faculty and the administrators love the money. So you give them more money, they'll raise prices, which is what they've been doing for the last 20 years. Brian Pilzuk, what do you think about the ISIS attack this morning in Normandy? Well, it's particularly personal because we had filmed our movie, Ronald Reagan, Rendezvous with Destiny. A part of it was filmed in Normandy at Pontefract, where we landed in 1944. So Callista and I already have an experience in Normandy, and Callista's band, the Fairfax City Band, where she plays the French horn, is thinking about going back to Normandy to play. And we were just talking last night about, you know, given what's happened in Nice, given what's happened in Paris, should we worry? And I said, based on, you know, sort of my vague general memories of years of looking at this, you know, the great concentrations of population that might belong to ISIS are in Marseille, which is very near Nice, and in Paris itself, with huge neighborhoods that are filled with people who might belong to ISIS. And I said, I think Normandy's probably very safe. So imagine I got up this morning, and here's this horrifying story about an 84-year-old priest being beheaded in Normandy. And it was a reminder, there is no place that's safe. It's a very sobering fact that we live in an era when anybody can be at risk anywhere. And we're going to have to do things which allow us to be effective in defending ourselves. And this is why when you have 61 speeches at the Democratic National Convention and not a single one talks about ISIS and terrorism and the problems we're faced with. It tells you how much the Democrats have become the ostrich party and are hiding from reality, hoping it'll go away. Toby Tate says, how do you think the Democrats will reverse their downward trend in the polls? Well, I suspect what they are counting on, and they should get a bounce normally. You're going to get a week of Democratic speeches, a week of Democratic ads. I saw several last night. I thought were pretty good, attacking Donald Trump. You're going to get networks bending over backwards to praise the Democrats, bending over backwards to tell us how wonderful everything is. So I wouldn't be too surprised if you didn't have some bounce. But what has to worry the Clinton team is that they spent a lot of money beating up Donald Trump. They bought lots of ads. He didn't buy any ads. They bought lots of ads beating up Donald Trump. And frankly, it had no effect because he's so effective at communicating in Facebook, in Twitter, in Instagram, on Fox and Friends, on Sean Hannity. I mean, he's out there all day, every day talking. He gave a great speech today, for example, which everybody says was much stronger than Hillary's, about reforming the Veterans Administration. Perfect example of the difference between the two parties. Hillary Clinton cannot be for dramatic reform of the Veterans Administration because she owes too much to the Government Employees Union, and the bureaucrats union is not going to tolerate change. Trump, on the other hand, is free to focus on the veterans because he's not owned by the Government Employee Union. So where Hillary is siding with the veterans, Trump is siding, where Hillary's siding with the bureaucrats, Trump is siding with the veterans. And you saw that in today's speech, and the news coverage has indicated just that Trump was much stronger, gave a great speech, had a number of good ideas, and is building on something he's already started, working with Chairman Jeff Miller in the House, who's the chairman of the Veterans Committee, and who really knows an immense amount about this. So for people who've been critical of Trump, here's a positive speech on a big topic with a lot of specific ideas. And it'll be interesting to see how much the media wants to give him credit for having done exactly what they told him he should be doing. Mary York, have American politics become too polarized, from Trump to Bernie's wing of the Democratic Party? You know, it's a very funny thing. Bernie represents socialism in a way that I would never have thought would be as widely as accepted as it is. And so he's taken the Democratic Party to the left, and in order to avoid fighting with him, Hillary has gone to the left with him. And the result is you now have the most left-wing platform the Democrats have ever had. It has the most socialistic ideas they have ever had. And of course, they refuse to deal with issues like ISIS and terrorism. Candy Archibald, what can we expect from Bill Clinton tonight? Well, two observations. It should be a good speech. He is one of the best speech writers and speech givers in American politics. So I'd be shocked if it wasn't a good speech. And I'll certainly try to watch it just because this is a great performer. I don't necessarily agree with him, but I admire his sheer ability as a speaker. Second, it'll be interesting to see how disciplined he is and how long it is. The speech he gave for Obama, I think, went 35 minutes over. Once he gets rolling, Bill loves to hear himself, and he always talks longer than he should. So tonight it'll be interesting to see, does he stay on schedule? Brenda Newberry, how was the Democratic National Committee allowed to have undocumented immigrants speak at the convention? Well, look, do you think the Obama administration is going to try to step in and arrest an undocumented immigrant who was at the Democratic National Convention? They got a free pass. The laws don't apply if the Democrats don't want the laws to apply. It's why we're in such grave danger of undermining the rule of law. And it also tells you a lot about the Democratic Party's absolute insistence on favoring people who are the outsiders. So if their choice, for example, notice that they've had the victims of police shootings, but they have not been willing to allow the widows of policemen who themselves have been shot. That gives you an example of the difference in the two parties. So, when is Trump going to meet and discuss the war that is happening in the streets of Chicago? Obama and Clinton claim to care, but weekly killing starts. I think it's a very important issue. When the Democrats last night were talking about how America's safe and America's positive and Trump was too negative, nobody wanted to confront the fact that there have been at least 3,400 people killed in Chicago since Barack Obama became president. Now, Hillary was born in Chicago. Barack Obama represented Chicago. Neither of them seems to care about the 3,400 victims who were killed in the last 7.5 years. And yet I think they deserve fully as much attention as anybody else. And I hope that one of the things that Donald Trump and Mike Pence will do is actually go to Southside Chicago, lay out a plan to keep people safe, and be engaged at that level. One last question here. Question, what are my feelings on the Bernie supporters? This is from Diane Harry LaMonica. Do I think they'll back Hillary? I think a lot of them will back Hillary. A lot of them will stay home. I think it'll be interesting to watch the next couple of nights. They were very, very upset up through until Michelle Obama spoke. I mean, they were booing people, and you know there was a substantial undercurrent of hostility. I think as people learn more about corruption, you know, if you think about it, Bill Clinton tonight is the $2 billion man. He has raised $2 billion for the Clinton Foundation, hundreds of millions of dollars for himself and his wife. He's taking money from the Russians. I think it's a great irony that the Clinton team is trying to blame Putin for hacking into the Democratic National Committee. First of all, it's an irony because the emails weren't written by Russians. The emails were written by Democrats, and they're pretty devastating, and they show a level of ongoing corruption and ongoing selling of influence that's amazing. Finally, it'll be interesting to see, given all the dictators, all the interest groups, all the billionaires who've given money to Bill Clinton, it'll be interesting to see tonight how he postures as though he's not rich, excuse me, as though he's not taken money from all these foreign governments. He hasn't taken money from all these foreign billionaires. It'll be interesting to see the gap between the real Bill Clinton and the guy who shows up to speak tonight, and I'll talk about that more in the near future. So thank you all very much for joining us. I hope you found this useful.